Please welcome to the stage, Phaedra Patrick.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for coming into this darkened room when we've got like one of the hottest days on this year on a bank holiday. So thank you very much. I'm really pleased people have come along. Second thing I should mention is I've forgot my glasses, so I can see close up, but I can't see distance. But I think I'm going to be all right. And I think whether we're writers or screenwriters or filmmakers or creatives, I think we've all got something in common, which is that we're all storytellers. And so although I'm a novelist, hopefully the masterclass that I'm going to give you today kind of covers all different areas that you might find useful or inspirational. And so I just thought I'd start with a little story. Which was 4 years ago. I went to the cinema with my son, who was 12 at the time, and we went to see The Diary of a Wimpy Kid because he was really into the Wimpy Kid films. And we just sat there in the cinema, and there was an actor in the film called Tom Everett Scott. I kind of knew him a little bit. He'd been in That Thing You Do with Tom Hanks, and he'd also been in American Werewolf in Paris. And we just enjoyed the movie, as we did, like for kids movie, really, family movie. But what I didn't realise at the time was 4 years later, the main actor would be actually starring in a film based on a novel that I wrote. So it was quite a surreal experience when I watched the film based on my book and realised it was the same actor. It was quite a special moment. So I've published 7 books, 7 novels, mainly for HarperCollins in the UK and USA, and I'm now with Bloomsbury in the UK. And out of those 7, 3 have been optioned for film and TV, which my dramatics right agent told me this week is quite unusual. So I thought I'd just share today a little bit of story about how I got published as a novelist, but also how those novels were then turned into films. Also, I kind of reached out to the dramatics right agent this week to kind of find out some insight from her about what she does, why books get chosen to be adapted into films and some don't, the process. And I also spoke to a Hollywood screenwriter. So he messaged me yesterday and he's given a lot of information, especially for this masterclass, which I will be delighted to pass on to you, and hopefully that's of interest. I'm also going to try and give you some useful tips and demystify the process. I think a lot of creative work, there's a lot of black art around it, so I'm trying to be practical with you. I've not done a talk for about 2 years because I'm usually sat in my writing shed in the dark, writing away, so please bear with me. I've got some notes just to prompt myself, if that's okay. So I would just start off by introducing myself properly. I'm Phaedra Patrick, often called Phaedra because I'm from Lancashire and everyone flattens the vowels. So my friends and family call me Fed. If you're thinking that's an unusual name, exotic name, I am pure Oldham. Phaedra is a Greek name and my surname is Scottish. But yes, I am pure Oldham, born and bred, and I've got relatives in St Anne's, so I come here quite a bit. And I remember once when I was 8 years old at school, going to a playground and looking around, and all the other kids were on the slides and swings. And I stood there thinking, I wonder where the word roundabout comes from. And then I thought, this is really strange. Why are you thinking about things like that? But at the time, there was no internet, because now you just Google it, wouldn't you, where English language comes from. But at the time, there was no way of finding out, and so I just ignored it. And I went to an Oldham library, and I'd look at the shelves, and I'd think, how do books get on shelves? How do people write books? How are they published? How do they sell in different languages? How do they become films? And again, I just didn't know and I couldn't find out, and I felt a bit silly telling teachers at school that I wanted to be a writer, because I thought people like me just didn't do things like that. I think if you're academic, they told you to become a teacher, and the less academic kids got told to go and work at the local bakery. So anyway, and I didn't fit into that. I didn't do anything about it for a long time, and I studied art at college, and I got a job in a double glazing factory, designing stained glass windows. That's a different story, but I hated it. And every lunchtime I would walk out to WH Smith's and I would look at all the books on the shelves, and I think, one day I would like to do that. And I read the blurbs on the back, and not only that, I read the acknowledgements, and I kind of got a little bit of insight into who agents were, what publishers did, and I think for every lunchtime I went up to WH Smith's and just kind of gained that knowledge a little bit. And then I just did practical stuff, so I offered to write the company newsletter just for experience in writing. So I had to make double glazing sound sexy to customers. But it was grounding, and I think any writing you can do comes in handy. And I also watch films, and to this day, when I'm watching a film, I will sit with a pen and paper and I write down kind of what happens at every minute, what the major plot points are, and I've got a big file of these just kind of transcripts of what I think about films and what happens when. So my husband and son hate it, they just say, put that pen away, you know, but I still do it. And when I write my novels, it's really useful material to refer back to. And I also think with films, a film is self-contained in 2 hours, whereas when you read a novel, it's 8 hours, and films are very visual, so I just find that easy to take on that information with films. So throughout my little talk today, I'm just going to drop some tips in here which may be useful. So my tip 1 is to train yourself in storytelling structure. Whether it's reading books or watching films, just to make them little notes to see, you know, when the turning points are, what the midpoint is, what the crisis is, that kind of thing can just really help when you come to produce your work. So my big issue was what to write. I wanted to become a writer. I had no idea what to write because I just thought all writers were from London. I thought they wafted around in dressing gowns with, like, you know, cigarette holders, and so it was like, what do you actually write? So what I did was, first of all, I wrote about 6 or 7 novels that were all rejected, but I just kind of saw it as practice. And along the way, some agents, when I submitted the work, did say, you know, you can write, but this one isn't for us. And that probably went on for about 10 years while I wrote these 6 novels. And then, amazingly, I got a literature agent, and I wrote another 2 novels with the literature agent, and she couldn't get me a publishing deal either. So I just thought, that's it, you've got an agent, you've made it, but she couldn't sell it into publishers. And I had that same conversation with her, is I want to write, I think I can write, what do I write? And she said to me, can you write sex, midwives or thrillers? And I said, no. I tried writing a thriller and she said it was too chatty. I thought, I can't write 50 Shades of Grey, you know, coming from Oldham. It just doesn't go together. Absolutely no way. And midwives, you know, I've got a child, but I know nothing about the medical profession. So I just said, no, I can't. And actually, I wanted to write something for me, not to market. So some agents will take you on because they love your work, and some agents want to make money and want you to write to market. So I had a friend recently who's a psychological thriller writer, and her agent said, these aren't really selling, can you write a cowboy romance? And she said, no, I'm going to write what I want to write. And that's what I did. So I went away and I had a good think about it. So I'd written 8 by now, they're all rejected. I thought, I'm going to write 1 more, and why is this one going to be different? And I think it was different because I wrote it from the heart. I wrote what I wanted to write. I remember showing my son my childhood charm bracelet and telling him the story behind each of the charms, one by one. And I thought that might make an interesting story, like short stories linked together behind the stories of the charms. And also the feedback from publishers were the market for stories about young women was saturated, which sounds ridiculous. So I thought, right, well, I'll write one about an old man then, and then you can't reject it for that reason, about it being about a young woman. So that's what I did. I wrote The Curious Charms of Arthur Pepper, and it was about an old man who was widowed. He'd been widowed for a year, and when he was clearing out his wife's belongings, he found a charm bracelet in her wardrobe that he'd never seen before. And he decides to set off on a journey and discover the story behind each of the charms one by one. And he finds out that his wife led a secret life before they met. And I remember going in Sainsbury's and they had the Life of Pi DVD. And on the cover was a tiger. And I used to get tiger envy. And I'd go in and say, why can't my book have a tiger in it? You know, really glamorous. And then I thought, it's my book, I can put whatever I want in it. So I put a tiger in my book. So my character, Arthur Pepper, has an encounter with a tiger in an English stately home. So that would be my tip 2, would be, when you're writing, put a tiger in it. Not literally, but find that one thing for you that means something to you, that makes your work unique, and put it in, because then it's going to be true to you. And I had a mission statement as well, and I do this for each of my books. It's just a one-liner that really helps me kind of work out what the story's about. And my mission statement for that book was, I wanted to write the Yorkshire version of Slumdog Millionaire. Because I love that book. It was based on a book Q&A by Vikas Swarup. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he's an Indian diplomat and I wasn't. So I thought I will write the Yorkshire version of Slumdog Millionaire. So don't judge me for setting it in Yorkshire. The reason I set it in Yorkshire, not Lancashire, was that I thought agents might have heard more about Yorkshire than Lancashire. So that would be my tip 3, would be to know your pitch. When you are creating any work, just if you can summarise in a sentence or 2. So if you do get stuck in that lift with Steven Spielberg or anyone who says, what is your story about, you can just reel it off in a sentence or 2. And it actually takes a long time to write that one-word pitch to really hone it. But when you're creating your work, it's something to go back to, and it can be really useful. And The Curious Charms of Arthur Pepper, it takes, apparently the odds of getting a literary agent are 1 in 6,000. And I just thought, somebody's got to be that one. Don't know, somebody's got to be that 1 in 6,000. And I just kept going. And even my own literary agency rejected me twice before it took me on. And I joke with the owner now that I wore him down. You know, I just kept going and kept going. And that was the one that broke through. So The Curious Charms of Arthur Pepper, it was sold in 27 languages worldwide. And I've now sold 1 million copies, 1 million books over the 7 books worldwide. And it was optioned in Hollywood. So that's a little story in itself. And it was optioned by a big Hollywood film studio, which has been ongoing for 9 years. So you know the stories about books take ages to come to publicate or to be made into a film. In that case, it's been true. It's been through 2 film directors and 3 versions of the script, and it is still there. And because it's a big Hollywood film studio, I'm not allowed to say who they are, you will have heard of them. And I did get to go out to LA both for a really nice lunch, so that was nice. And the thing is, even if books are optioned into films, very few make it onto the screen. And I think just actually just enjoying that process and learning about something that I didn't know about, and you get like a little option fee every year, you know, and knowing it might happen, that's been really exciting. But going back to lovely Tom Everett Scott, this film was my 2nd book, which was the Rise and Shine Benedict Stone, and that one did make it. So my mission for this one was chocolate with gemstones, because I thought that's what it is. It's kind of just a feel-good, warm story set in a small village. And it's about a jeweller who's down on his luck. He's separated from his wife, they can't have children and can't seem to find a way forward. And then one night there's a knock on his door, and it's not his wife, it's his teenage niece. She's 16 and she's come from America and she's going to change his life. and she helps him out in the jewellery shop, and through the story behind gemstones, she challenges him to win his wife back. And it was actually really exciting seeing it on film. The first time I learned that they were actually going to make it into a film was when I got a remittance, a payment, and I was like, why have I been paid? And they said, well, actually, they're going to make it and it's gone into production. But that was the first time I learned, was when I actually got an email saying I got paid for it. It's a Hallmark movie. I'd never heard of Hallmark before, because they're like cards, so I was like, what, like the card shop? And they said, yeah, Hallmark movies are like really big in America. And I think what's interesting about Hallmark is they make 90% of whatever they buy. So they make 80 or 90% of the movies, and they make about 50, 60 movies a year. It's a big kind of American institution, just kind of family feel-good films. So with this one, from publication of the book to the movie was 4 years, which was quite quick. So it's a completely different experience. And I went down to London and we had a nice cocktails with my agency, and when I went back to my room that night, they'd sent me the script, so it was already in filming, already in production, but that was the first time I saw the script. And I read it that night in bed, and it was hilarious, because they'd moved it from, my original book was kind of set in Saddleworth, near Oldham, and they'd transported it to America. So in the book, Gemma is 16, and what she really wants to do is go to York Dungeons. But in the film, she actually wants to go and eat lobster in a casino. And the wife in my book is called Estelle, and she is from Saddleworth, around my area. But in the film, I think they changed her name to Amelia, and she's Argentinian. So like little things like that. But actually the DNA was there, the story was there, some of my lines were there. And I always kind of equate it to your characters, and it's a bit like your kids going to university or college. They're always going to be yours, but it's time for them to have a new adventure, and they're going to get up to some stuff that you don't want to know about, and you've got no influence over, and you've just got to let them get on with it, but they'll always be your kids. And I thought that was kind of a healthy way of looking at it. And the filming only took 2 to 3 weeks, and then it was finished. And it was really nice because the young girl who played Gemma, 16, she was in constant contact. She was sending me photos from the set of the filming, and then in the social media I was like able to chat to some of the actors, which was really nice. So in the end it was just a really positive experience. And I think my favourite story was from that book was when I did my first set of edits. You write your book, it takes about 10 months, and then your editor gives you the edits. And the first thing you want to do is cry, because they've written you, excuse the language, but my agent calls it a shit sandwich. They give you all the nice stuff up front, oh, this is brilliant, but then it gets all the hard graft and the work you need to do on it. And there was one scene that I wanted to write. They wanted something in the middle, and I wrote this scene, and the scene is where Benedict, the main character, he wants to win his wife back, and she's having an art exhibition, and he decides to hire a white horse to turn up to kind of try and win her back. You know, he's kind of being chivalrous, and the person he hires the horse from doesn't bring a horse, they bring a llama to the art gallery. So actually seeing that llama on the screen, thinking this is really surreal, that 1 minute you're there in your shed writing this scene with a llama, and then actually somebody films that scene, it's really kind of special. And my son kind of said it's a Hallmark movie. He's 19 now and Hallmark movies don't count, but I think they do, and I love that film. I've seen it about 5 times, and I think it brings people a lot of pleasure. It's just kind of a nice, uplifting family film. So my third experience was very different again. This one was for the little Italian hotel, and I remember I was feeling a bit down over Christmas, I don't know why, and I came back and the agent said, oh, we've got an option for you, another book. This was my 6th book, and it's been optioned by a TV company as a TV series, this one. This one was different because they actually announced it, so this was on Variety. They actually put a message out that they'd optioned it, and the difference with that is With the Curious Charms of Arthur Pepper, with it being a big studio, they kept it all under wraps, and it's still under wraps. Whereas with this one, because it was a smaller independent company, they want that funding, and they want to turn it around quicker. So they optioned it, but then apparently they want the buyer as soon as possible to buy it so they can get the funding and get it out there, and that's what they're doing at the moment. They've got an actress attached to it, they've got a treatment on the pitch, they've got a screenwriter working on it, and they are now in the process of trying to get that funding then to get it made. So fingers crossed, and with all these things, I think you've just got to go with the flow, because the likelihood is they won't happen, but it'll be really exciting if they do. So fingers crossed on that one. So those are my stories and experiences of having novels turned into films or option. Overall, it's been completely positive, exciting, frustrating. You do get paid a small amount each time they get optioned, but there's no guarantee of getting it made onto screen. So my tip 4 would be optimistic, but be realistic as well. And I mentor a young writer, and she emailed me and said, I really want to write. She works as a speech therapist. When can I give up my day job and become a full-time writer? And I had to say it might never happen, because you might not even have a book published. So go and try it. But actually having a book published it's hard. It's hard, you just have to keep trying. And even if you get a book published, people have got to buy it, to keep you in employment. So I'm lucky that I've had 8. My next one's out next month. I've had a 2-book contract, then a 2-book contract, then a 2-book, then a 2-book. But they have to keep renewing, so they have to sell the books to be able to give you a new contract. I think it's a little bit like X Factor. We say to people, you are going to be the next big pop star, and then the record doesn't sell, and then they just get dropped because there's always other people. So I think you've got to be really determined and committed, and just keep going for it, and be kind of sheer bloody minded, really. So that was the step-by-step process of my books. With anyone kind of interested in the process of it, so I've reached out to a dramatics right agent and a screenwriter who've also given us some advice that I'm going to share with you today. And I thought it'd be interesting, how do we actually get those options? So what I would do is I publish a book, I would write the book, my agent would sell it to the editor, or I've already got a contract, and then she tries to find producers who might be interested. Now, she doesn't do that with every book in the agency. It's more if she feels like it would translate well to screen, or if there's heat on it, what she said, if there's like some general interest in it. And she would then go out and try and find a producer. So like matchmaking in a way. She's got a book, can she find anybody who might be interested in producing it? And then they would typically option it, usually for 18 months with an extension of maybe 12 months. And then they would hold that option, and they would try, the producer would then have the rights for that length of time, and then they would try to find the funding from a director or a studio who would then be interested in funding it, so they could then make it and then distribute it. And then the production company or the studio would try and find a screenwriter to write the script on it. And then if we're very, 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 very lucky, that's when it might be greenlit and actually made into a film. So the story behind Arthur Pepper, how that found its way to a Hollywood studio was there's a thing called literary scouts. They're self-employed, and it's their job to kind of just look out for hot projects. Or just, things that there's kind of a bit of buzz about. And apparently a scout had got hold of Arthur Pepper, and they got it in the hands of a producer who was in London. So he got hold of the book, and he said he sat in a cafe and he read the book, and he knew that he wanted it. He luckily works for the talent agency LBI, who represent Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio, and he phoned his boss and said, I think we should option this movie, and his boss said, option the film, and his boss said, go for it. So then, his name is Patrick, and then Patrick, the producer, then went out to film studios he thought might be interested in funding it. And so we were having conversations with the producer and the Hollywood studio. But like I said, it's been going on for 9 years now. So my tip 5 would be patient, because things move very, very slowly and it's very random. And the fact is, again, most options don't become films, so just enjoy the process. So I asked Sheila, who's my dramatics right agent. We work for, my agency is Darley Anderson, who represent Lee Child and Martina Cole. So Sheila kind of does all the dramatics rights. And I just asked her opinion, what makes a book appealing for adaptation? How much creative input can writers expect? And a few other nuggets. So I spoke to her on Wednesday, and she's given us this advice especially for this masterclass. So she said her role is to get the material out there. Not every book, but it's usually interesting or things that there's heat on it. She needs to find a producer that's super keen, who loves it. And then she said producers and directors, they usually have money, or they have money and taste. She said the ones with money and taste are usually kind of more arty studios. And her role is to urge everything along, do the contracts, all the communication and stuff. And I said, what makes a book appealing for adaptation? And she said previously, pre-COVID, she'd have said a great story, which is what we want to hear really. She said, but the market is really changing, it's contracting, and everything's more market driven these days. We're seeing less films and more expansion of streaming, TV, movies and series. So she said really what they're looking for, what producers are looking for, is something they can set up with a buyer, which I thought it sounded quite hard-hearted actually, but she said they're looking for something that they can sell and know where it fits and has got buzz about it. And she said usually the producers who option movies, she said they usually feel some kind of empathy with the story, or it means something to them, and they will read it many times before they close a deal. So my tip 6 would be, when you're writing something or producing something, just make it mean something to you, because I think your passion for the story hopefully comes through to other people, and then they'll be passionate about it too. I asked her how much creative input can writers expect, and she said if you're the author of a book, not much at all. She said you've more chance if you're a literary writer rather than a commercial writer. She said, but it's the screenwriters who are more involved. So basically when the author has a book that is optioned, it's then passed over to the scriptwriter, and the scriptwriter tends to go off on their own. They refer to your book, but they rarely have a conversation with you about it. Again, it's like waving your kid off to college. And then apparently the screenwriters need that creative freedom for their first draft, and then the producer will give them notes, and it can go through many iterations and many drafts. And then the other person I reached out to was Jeff Stockwell, and I've never met Jeff actually. He was the screenwriter on Arthur Pepper. We only got in contact after he'd finished the screenwriting, and he told me he'd probably made some changes that I love and some that I hate, which is fine. He was a contract writer at Pixar. He wrote The Road to Terabithia, A Wrinkle in Time. He worked on Percy Jackson, and as I say, was the first writer on Arthur Pepper. And I've just got some little bits that I'll read out from him, which are useful tips that he's given to you directly. So he said, the great among many benefits to novelling over scripting is you've single-handedly brought several beautiful books into the world during the time that a small army of film folk have danced around attempting to get one on the screen. So maybe the first rule of adapting books into scripts is be sure you love the process of adapting as much, if not more, than actually getting to sit down in front of the movie. Studios do sometimes like to keep space between authors and screenwriters, and we can theorise as to why, but I don't really know even after 20 years and many adaptations. It's fine, though I do like at least having an initial conversation with the person who brought the world of the story to life, mostly to let them know that whatever gymnastics the plot and characters might go through during the adaptation, I'm devoted to protecting the spirit of it all, as that's what draws us together in the first place. The biggest challenge in adapting novels is conveying what's going inside the head of the lead character. The novelist has free rein to dance around in there and keep the reader aligned with what the character is thinking and feeling, their desires, ulterior motives. None of this shows up on screen. It almost always has to be signalled by dialogue, which can sound terrible or boring if not too clearly signalled. So a huge hill in adaptation is how to get the wonderful stuff the novelist has put inside characters' heads out in a way that helps actors and directors let it shine through. I read books several times to inhale them, so the material respects and exists in spirit. A novel has dozens of hours of info, but a film only has 2 and is designed to be consumed in one sitting. Film audiences have trouble with too many significant characters, so adaptations often drop characters or merge them. Adaptations, so I'm trying to read my writing here. Adaptations look for ways not to lose audiences. Boredom levels in an audience are high, so we need to look for ways to enhance ticking clocks in more scenes. Film costs way more to produce than novels, so we need to seek to attract a wide range of audiences as possible to broaden engagement. So what he did say with Arthur Pepper, I had a minor character who's a teenager, and Jeff said he'd brought that teenager, he'd given him a much bigger story in the script to appeal to a wider audience. And I just have to kind of let this go, because it's a completely different media. And with the Little Italian Hotel, they'd added a character, they'd added a trans character, and also a lesbian love affair. And again, it's out of my hands, you know, because I write the stories and I have to trust that the screenwriters keep that DNA, but they will change my work, you know, and hopefully make it better, or just write it in a way that it will appeal to audiences. And then Jeff finally said, it's true that it can take a distressingly long time for a film to actually get up and underway. And yes, that many that do get scripted do not make it into production at all, but I'm ever hopeful for the special ones. It's impossible not to worry over some of the changes, flat out disapprove of others, and hopefully mostly enjoy the surprises and be proud that Arthur Pepper is still carrying along everything you taught him. So my tip forward would be accept that your story will change. Whether you're writing it, whether you're a script writer, whether you're a novelist, in the process of making it into a film, it is a different media and the story will change. Just got 3 more little tips for you before we finish up, and I'm happy to answer any questions, whether it's about publishing industry, agents, producers or anything. So my tip 9 would be open, just network, look for those opportunities. I think we've got a good example. Do you mind me mentioning you, Lynn? So I used to work at the Co-op in Manchester 11 years ago. I still worked at the Co-op, but I actually ran a film festival for children at the Co-op for 6 years, and Lynn actually ran the workshops for the kids, didn't you, Lynn? You're part of Freebird Animations. And now Lynn is a novelist herself, and she's come down to see me today, which is amazing. We've not seen each other for years. But it is just about networking and chatting to people and finding them connections, because nothing is ever wasted. My tip 10 is just a practical one. I wouldn't say I'm a confident person, and I think writing books, you are going to get so many knockbacks, and being a filmmaker, you are going to get so many knockbacks, and actually you might not feel confident about it when you sit there trying to write a story. Is it good enough? Will I get an agent? Will I get an audience? You know, is it any point doing it? And I think just one thing that helped me was just to switch words. So instead of saying I might not be able to find the confidence, but I can always find the determination. So I'd sit there in front of a blank screen, and instead of saying, I don't feel confident, I would say, I feel determined, and I will try to keep going. And then I've just got one more tip, which I added this morning, so I've got 11 tips, not 10. Success is what you define it and what you decide you want it to be. So for me, it was always to see a book on a shelf, and I was interested in how books became films. But honestly, if writing or screenwriting brings you pleasure, if you just want to bring stories to life, if it's a hobby, if it's just something you like doing, if it's good for your mental health, then it's up to you as what defines success. It does not have to be a Hollywood movie or on TV. It can be whatever you want it to be. So I'm passing a lot of stories and info. I hope some of it's been interesting. I will just say again, 11 years ago I worked for the Co-op in communications, and I did not know any of this strange world that I'm now in, that I've been in for 11 years. I got offered redundancy at the same time as a book deal, and I left the Co-op and I said I will write full-time for a year, and I've now been doing it for 11 years. My 8th book will be published next month. It's called The Time Hop Coffee Shop. I still find the industry absolutely fascinating, and even if I don't get another contract after this one, I will write another one. I've already decided that if I don't get a contract for another commercial one, I've got a horror story that I would like to do. There's so many stories that I would like to tell. And I think that's it. If you're doing something that you're passionate about, that you're interested in, that you wake up in the morning and it's something you want to do, then just enjoy it. So thank you for listening, and if anyone has got any questions at all, please feel free to ask.
Literary agent, did you meet them in person, or did you just mail off like a few chapters of the book? And then did you any tips for that?
Yeah, so when you want an agent, so a good place to start, I mean, you can look online, or there's the Writers and Artists guidebook, and they've got all the agents listed in there, and each agent usually lists on their website what they look for, so it's usually a synopsis and 3 chapters or 2 chapters. So my first bit of advice is don't send them what they don't want. So you usually send a covering letter, a page synopsis, and then 2 or 3 chapters. And then if they are interested, they will get in contact with you. Now, when I was submitting, it used to be a very polite industry. People would respond to you with a yes or no. I've recently had a friend who's a published author who wrote to 28 agents and 20 did not respond to her. There's kind of a bit of ghosting, I suppose. I suppose it's a bit like any job. You know, you'd apply for a job and they would write back and say you're not successful. But now there's kind of businesses will just not bother responding. Yeah. And then if they are interested, they will say, can we have the full manuscript? And you will send the full manuscript off. They will read it. It might take 2 or 3 months, depends how keen they are. If they are interested in representing it, they will then get in contact with you. And you can have a chat on the phone or meet in person just to see if you're the right fit together. So I was actually down in London working for the Co-op on a fair trade conference, and I then skipped off and met my agent, and we got along, and she offered me representation. And that's how it works.
Was that just through a sort of blind submission to the...
Yeah, like I say, they turned me down twice before, and I did know the agency, and by then I'd had like 8 novels rejected, so I kind of got to know, you know, who the agents were, who might be looking for that kind of work, and then, so I think I sent it to 5 this time round. I thought I'd send to 5, and then if they reject it, I'll then send to another 10. I was very lucky in that all 5 agents that time asked to receive the full manuscript. But with Claire, and she's still my agent to this day, I liked it. She said, can I look at it and I will get back to you a week on Wednesday. And I kind of like that preciseness. Like I said, we got along, and they signed me up. And then you think that's great, that I'm there, but then she has to then submit to publishers to see if she can get a publishing deal, which she managed to do.
You've got a microphone.
I've got a microphone, so for the next question.
Thank you. That was really interesting and very helpful. Have you ever been in a position where you've had to verbally pitch something, and you're talking about your agent trying to find a publisher for it, they're verbally pitching it for you, or are you always working with a paper treatment?
So each time, so I'm now out of contract in the UK and USA, so what we do now is I pitch. So the USA will say, we are potentially interested in contracting her again. What are your ideas? So I have to write a pitch and synopses to kind of see if they're interested in those ideas. So I did do that 1 year, and I wrote 5 ideas, and the UK turned them all down. I had to go back to the drawing board and come up with some more ideas. So I'll go through that stage. But then you're also in situations where I went to a book conference in America, and they'll say, hey, what's your book about? And you're like, So actually just having that verbal pitch ready to hand to talk to people what it's about is really helpful. But yeah, so I would typically write, I write the title, I write a one-liner of what the pitch is, and then I'll write a page of the synopsis of what my idea is. And then I also usually put a note at the bottom in why I think it's commercial, or why I've come up with that idea, which I think might help then the publisher to get an idea of... Because I studied marketing, so I'm always kind of aware that whatever I produce, it's my work and it's creative, but also I'm trying to sell it, it's my living, and getting across how it might sell, and what might be appealing to publishers and readers, and what's going on in the marketplace. So quite a bit of strategy.
I think it's hard for authors and also for screenwriters to have that business hat on their head as well.
It's true, yeah. I remember having a chat with my agency, and I said I am aware that I'm creating a product, and it's a product to sell. And they said, thank goodness you said that, because lots of other writers don't see it like that. They kind of see it as their baby, or I think some author friends who are self-published, they say, well, I like to self-publish because I don't want anyone telling me what edits to do and how to change my story. And that's fine, if you feel like that. Whereas I feel like I've produced a piece of work for 10 months. I've got no idea if I can't see the wood for the trees by then, and I can't tell if it's any good or not. So actually having an expert look at it for me and saying, these bits are strong, can you tweak these bits? I just find that really helpful and fascinating, having that extra input. But at the end of the day, it is a product that the publisher needs to sell it, people need to buy it, or else I don't get another contract.
That's really helpful, really coherent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
You were saying you had 8 novels rejected, which sounds so brutal to me. Have you ever considered going back to them, rework them, or are you more a person that moves forward and says, I need to write new stuff and leave behind what has been written?
Yeah, I kind of looked at them like they weren't good enough the first time round. I kind of saw them as trial runs. However, when I submitted Alpha Pepper, my second idea, so I submitted Alpha Pepper and also idea for a second book, which was rejected. That's the book that I've kind of influenced the one I've just written. I always wanted to write one about a family who were famous for starring in coffee commercials. I don't know why, I just had this idea at the back of my head. I kind of pitched it 10 years ago, it was turned down, but this time that's the one I wrote, so it's changed significantly. I just think no work is wasted. Whether they become fully fledged books or not, I don't know. Whether they were just practice runs, I might come back to them, might not, but I kind of like to look forward. And what was popular back then might not be popular now. I think the market's always changing for books. So like 5 years ago, psychological fiction, psychological thrillers were all the rage. If you write a psychological thriller now, the market might be saturated. I subscribe to the Bookseller magazine every week, and I read what all the books coming out are about, so I've got that knowledge about what might be coming up, and then it's just trying to find them gaps of what potentially might sell. So I got the Bookseller the other week, and there were 3 stories in there about cannibalism, about women turning to cannibalism. So I thought, that's a new one, you know. So things kind of seem to come in waves, and you'll get this in the cinema as well, don't you? Get like all the superhero films, or you know, like you might get might be a time for kind of you know, gangster films. You get kind of different waves coming up, so a lot of it's kind of predicting what might come up. So in literature at the moment, there's a lot of the Japanese and Korean magical realism coming up. So the book that I've got coming out next is, I've tried writing magical realism to see how that works. But yeah, so it's kind of, you should write what you want, but it is just also that awareness of what to do with it and what the market might want. But yeah, so I have got all my books somewhere probably on floppy disks, you know, and disk drives that don't even work, and I've probably forgot what some of them are. But yeah, none of it's wasted. They might come in useful one day.
And if I may ask another question, have you ever considered to be more part of the process of adapting a novel of yourself, like maybe not waiting for a deal, but pursuing a deal, or working with a director, or really be involved, maybe becoming yourself a screenwriter for your own novels? Is that something you're thinking about?
I did ask my agent about screenwriting, because I was interested in kind of learning the craft of screenwriting, and she said to me not to do it. She said it was easier for her to sell a novel into producers rather than a script. So I've just gone off her advice. And I think if I was out of contract, it might be something I might try to do, but it's a completely different industry really. So I'm kind of self-trained as a novelist, and that was always the bit that I've really worked hard on. And I'm lucky that I've been able to step into the kind of filming arena a bit. And so yeah, I'm interested in all of it, but for me it's about the novels and going in that direction. But I did meet a young scriptwriter. He tried to option out for Pepper actually, got in touch, he lived in Trinidad. And this is just an interesting little networking story and why it's important. He was called Ollie, and he worked in Trinidad. He had a friend who was a filmmaker who was also a carpenter. And the carpenter ended up making some furniture for a property where Will Smith was staying. And he got talking to Will Smith, and he said, me and my friends are filmmakers, and Will Smith invited him over to the set of Guy Ritchie's movie, Aladdin, in London. So Ollie was this young filmmaker. He came over to London, we met for a brew at Euston Station, and he spent a week on this Hollywood film set, just purely because his friend was a carpenter and they got chatting, you know. So a lot of luck in there, but it's just them kind of connections and that networking opportunities, and just even today, just sitting next to the person next to you and chatting away and seeing what connections. So I've just met Simon today, and we're both from Oldham, you know, and we both like lived in the same area in Oldham, just from chatting. We've never met each other before, so just them contacts and conversations can just lead to all kind of things. So I'm not saying no to script writing to films, but not at the moment. I'm kind of trying to get another contract for novels 9 and 10.
I think we're just about out of time, Phaedra,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
If there was one more question, I'm happy to take it. Yeah.
So just out of curiosity to do with writing itself, I just wondered what your favourite authors are that inspire you and that you're influenced by in your actual writing of the novels.
Oh, thank you. So I like an author called Claire Pooley. She wrote one called The Authenticity Project. I kind of tend to read uplifting fiction, and I really like her story. She writes absolutely brilliant characters. I think one of the nice things about being a writer is you can message other writers without them thinking you're weird. So I could like message her and say, Claire, I really like your books. And then we met for a coffee in London, and that's really nice. I like B.A. Paris. She wrote one called Behind Closed Doors. She writes psychological fiction. She's a friend of mine, and she sold 7 million of that one, which was absolutely amazing. And she's a really wonderful writer, so I really like reading her books. But I kind of read widely. I kind of go off covers, you know, so I will read the bookseller and I will circle which books I like the idea of that are coming up. But even just going to Sainsbury's or Waterstones and standing in front of the shelves and seeing which ones catches your eye. So sometimes I'll read horror, sometimes thrillers, sometimes commercial uplifting fiction. But yeah, I really like Claire Pooley. And there's a lady called Sally Page as well. She writes really nice commercial fiction. But I was chatting to someone earlier about reading classics and being really well read, and I would say that I'm probably not. Yeah, I'm probably not that well read.
You can't contact them, can you?
No, I'm just always attracted to kind of nice, uplifting stories, really. And then I think just one more tip is I don't know. I think this is an industry secret with authors. I don't know about filmmakers, but I don't know if you're aware of a book called Save the Cat. Is that a big book in the screenwriting world?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So it was written by Blake, I forgot his surname. Blake Snyder. And he was a Hollywood scriptwriter, and he analysed films, and he kind of breaks them down into these 13 beats of what happens when. And into different genres, and it's kind of a bit of secret in novelist world to kind of use that book for structure. It's really, really helpful. Whether you kind of, some creative people just kind of write or film and see where it takes them, and this is very much about structure, but I just found it really useful, and I think if you are wanting to write a book or make a film, it's just a useful resource to dip into.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think she deserves a huge round of applause. Thank you very much for that. Wonderful. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, Phaedra. It's an absolute delight, an absolute pleasure.